Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hi, and welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I'm so excited today to have on my guest, Wendy Sterling. Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Jory. How are you?
I am great, and I'm really excited to have you on today. And it's just, it's so funny how life turns out, isn't it? I mean, so to give you guys the background, I knew Wendy from college when my boyfriend at the time, who became my ex-husband, or I guess husband then ex-husband, was in the same fraternity as Wendy's then boyfriend turned husband turned ex-husband. And I think there was always a camaraderie that I know I felt that maybe I never communicated with you at that time in college of, being in my relationship at the time, it was kind of like everyone knew us. We were like that one couple. And I felt it was kind of similar with you guys. Like everyone knew who you guys were.
Yes. Most definitely.
20 years later, we reconnect, obviously stayed in touch through Facebook. And now here we are, both divorced, both booming careers and living our most authentic lives. And Wendy has come with me on my retreats, and that has been such a neat way to continue getting to know each other in the here and now after knowing each other from 20 years ago. And Wendy's on today as an expert in divorce coach, as she is booming in her business, as she is building this brand of how to help women through this process. So Wendy, tell us more about yourself and how you got to where you are now. And what's been the journey like?
Sure. Well, thank you so much. And it's so great to reconnect, obviously, with you after so many years. I, first and foremost, am a mom. I have two boys, 13 and 10, almost 10. And I went through an unexpected separation about 2.5 years ago. And during that process, I started reading a lot of self-help books that, I was trying to make sense of what was going on and how my entire world as I knew it started crumbling around me, and that foundation that I invested over 20 years in, how and where do I even start rebuilding from here?
It's such an overwhelming thought.
It is.
And even when we are the ones, and I'll speak in first person, when I wanted more of that change to happen, it doesn't make the what's next any less overwhelming.
No.
I kind of equate it to, as a quick aside, if you've ever had voluntary surgery, let's say SOR for, some sort of augmentation of some kind. When I've had surgery that I've chosen to do, I've often thought, oh, it's not going to be painful because I've chosen this. Mm-hmm. And yet the surgery is still a surgery. It's still going to hurt no matter what. So whether you're on the receiving end of, I did not make this choice, or even I've made this choice to divorce, nonetheless, it's still a painful process.
Completely. And it's inevitable, right? Pain. Right. Inevitable, and it's all about your attitude and your mindset heading into it. But I just felt like I was, completely just barely treading water. And I didn't even know what to do or where to begin. I had, invested 20 years in a relationship, 16 years in a marriage. I was in corporate America for well over 18 years. And all of a sudden everything was up in the air. And I started reading a ton of self-help books, and while it was helping, it wasn't necessarily healing me in the way that I needed.
Did you have friends who had gone through divorce at that time? Did you have a support system of anyone to turn to?
I did. I had wonderful friends, and actually my divorce was a great way to clean house with a lot of friends, which is kind of, funny but sad at the same time. But I really learned who my true friends were, and I had, an amazing best friend here, locally in Los Angeles. Actually my separation brought my sister and I back together, and we're closer than ever as a result. And, the two of them became heavy crutches for me, but in a way that I knew I had them there, but I wasn't necessarily moving myself forward in the way that I needed to, and also for my kids.
Sure.
And out of nowhere, I was on Facebook one day and a friend of a friend posted how she had become a life coach. And I started reading a little bit about what it was that she was doing. And I started reading, some of the qualities of, what a life coach does and, some of the things that a life coach does, how they help their clients. And I started realizing that it was a lot of what I was doing in corporate America. As a leader of a team, a lot of the same things that I was doing as a team leader, you do as a life coach. And I really loved that sort of that mentoring and that coaching aspect of my job. And I never knew that it was something that I could do full time. But at the same time, not only was it appealing as a career, but I also realized that at no time had anyone ever asked me, what do you want your life to look like, 6 months from now? Because I was constantly living in the past. I'm sure you mentally have been through that as well.
Well, and it's so hard to envision that future because it's so easy to get stuck in it being fear-based. That unknown becomes this big black hole of an abyss that when we've spent so many years having safety and comfort and security in or I guess I should rather say a perceived sense of safety and comfort and security of knowing what the future looks like.
Yeah.
Again, whether it's by our choice or not, it's really hard to even know where to begin and to say, wait a second, I actually have a piece in how this turns out. Like I get to decide this.
Yes.
I get to choose, right. I get to choose these next steps intentionally. Wow, what a concept.
Blew my mind, right? Totally blew my mind that I had choices. I mean, you get into a relationship, and I think with any relationship or marriage, you just get to a complacent place, right? Where you're just constantly going through the motions and you sort of lose yourself. And I realized that I had really lost myself and didn't even know who I was. I didn't even know what I wanted outside of the couple that I had become a part of. It was the two of us in the same sentence. It was never just Wendy. And
can I pause you there for 1 second? Because I think that experience that you just described can even happen even when we're happily married.
Absolutely.
And so some of these things, even if any of the listeners who are happily married and don't need necessarily divorce tools, but maybe can gain some insight around, wait, how do I even find myself outside of these roles? Because I see so many women getting stuck in that.
So what I thought was really amazing was that, my separation and divorce wound up helping a lot of my married friends.
In what ways?
So it helped them with their communication with their spouse. That was one of the areas that, I don't necessarily think I grew up in a home where I love my parents. I'm very close to them, but I wasn't really allowed to have my own emotions. So it was almost like I had to kind of go with the flow of the family. And so my communication in my marriage was really poor. And it was something that I highlighted as to a reason that my marriage fell apart. And it was also just from an intimacy perspective, right? I mean, intimacy through conversation, and just really understanding and hearing your spouse or, your significant other and giving them the space to communicate. I mean, it was something that I think, I shone a very bright light to my friends. What went wrong in my marriage, and for them to kind of have that wake-up call and to say like, oh my God, I don't want this to be me.
Well, it's so fascinating you bring up the friend piece. And I think there's so many areas of divorce that I don't think get talked about. A lot of it, right?
Yes.
And the friend piece, I'm so glad you're bringing this up because this was something that was a huge awareness to me. I did not know to expect. It was, in my experience, kind of funny because did you ever play that game when you were married where you'd like look at your friends or people you knew and be like, oh my God, I wonder who's going to get divorced? Yeah. And like statistically, some of us are going to, but I wonder who that's going to be. And then one day we realize, oh my God, shit, it's going to be us, right? Like I never saw that coming. And what happened for me was I actually lost quite a bit of my friends. And it was really hard. I mean, like you said, it shows you who's really there and who's not. But I didn't really judge the friendships that I lost because I think divorce can be really threatening to other couples, especially when they see, oh my God, like this can actually happen. Our marriage is not as secure as maybe I thought it was. So like you said, it shines a light on maybe where people are having problems that they've thought, oh, no big deal, we'll work through this. And now they see, wait a second, divorce is actually an option. Oh shit, I better take care of my business. And the other thing that happened to me was after my divorce, I wasn't in suffering. I was embracing this new piece of my life. And I think that was hard for people. I think I actually would have had more friends at the time had I been in more suffering. But because I was happy and thriving in many ways, let's just say it was always easy. But I don't think they wanted to see me happy because it made them more scared of, oh shit, she's happily divorced, but I'm unhappily married, because many marriages struggle. And I don't think they wanted to see me happy. I don't think they knew how to be around me. Combined with, one last thing, I think that I became a threat. Right now, husbands were not going to want their wives, my girlfriends, to go out with me for fear that either they thought we were trolling for guys at the bar, which that wasn't always what I was doing, but just maybe for fear that divorce could be contagious.
100%. It's
like, oh my gosh, what if she convinces my wife how much better it is to not have to deal with these problems, which was so not true. But those, I believe, were the perceptions of what I experienced. And it was so hard because I didn't know I was going to lose friends. I just thought I was getting divorced.
100%. And, it's, I love that you bring that up too, because I think that what it does is it, aside from shining that light on their own marriages, I think it also exposes the weaknesses that exist. And, we live in such a social media first world now that we get to pick and choose what we want people to see from our life, right? And I call it the Facebook facade.
Yeah, it's a great name for it.
Because, once the facade is over, reality kicks in, and that's scary to people. It's the fear, right? And fear is such a powerful thing. And part of my mission as a life coach for women like me who have been through divorce, women like you, is really to get the shame out of the language around being divorced and to stop being, it's almost like we're being, it is like a disease, like you're going to catch it. So it's almost like we're being, what's the word? When you're
exposed or
like you get quarantined, yes. Right? And, it's interesting too, because, and I don't know if you felt this at all, but there were friends who were more curious about the story, right? They wanted to know the why behind the divorce. And that wasn't something that I was willing to share or to talk about because it was a very private matter. I have two, at the time I had two smaller kids who, don't know all the ins and outs, nor should they or will they until they're the appropriate age. But I was so guarded on the reason that it was like, why does it matter why? It's like, because it's contagious, right? And it's coming from a place of fear. And I love that you also use the word thrive, which is a really very important word for me. And it's actually a part of what my own business and practice is all about, is really helping women to embrace what I call their thrive story and to dump the sob story. Because at the end of the day, what allows us to really step into our power is sort of the afterlife of divorce, right? Is really stepping into this new place where we are thriving as our new selves. Because, how many times would you say when you were married, did you really have time to take a hard look at yourself and really want to change?
I don't think that I ever did that until I decided, wait a second, I'm starting to do this work and now I've got to sit with what comes up for me. That's the scary part.
Exactly. And so for me, the way that I look at it is like, the whole situation that I had been through, my separation, my divorce, it really forced me to take a really hard look at myself. And, this is something that I also work on with my clients, is really just, you have to embrace all of you. And that also involves embracing your past. But where the power comes in is really owning who you were, but also stepping into your power of knowing that you can make changes.
Right. And that's the whole thing that I believe is I will hold the space for you that change is possible, right? You may not be able to feel it or see it in the moment, but that's what our jobs are, is to hold that space. Saying, I will create this container in which this change will exist, even if you don't know what the step forward is. It's there.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of what coaching gave to me and why I signed up to learn how to be one and why I got my own coach was I needed someone to help me and to guide me along what it means to think about me and to think about what
in an unselfish way, because women aren't taught how to do that in an unselfish way.
Exactly. And that's how it felt at first. I was like, wait, that just feels a little awkward. Like, that's so selfish, and I'm not a selfish person. And I think what coaching and my coach has really helped me to understand is that it's okay to be selfish in that way. It's okay to get to know yourself again. It's okay to put yourself first. And I don't say that in the sense that, I mean, my kids always come first, as I'm sure your daughters do for you. But, I have to put myself first in order to be the best version of me and to propel myself forward. And it's one of the things that I love that I was taught, and I wouldn't have learned it had I not been coached or gone through my certification program. It's the greatest gift that I can give myself. It's the greatest gift that I love giving my clients. I'm sure you do similar with your clients. And it's about seeing the silver lining. It's about seeing that this happened and how are you going to use it to move yourself forward.
And to not let it define you in a negative way that keeps you stuck. And I don't know that if I've ever shared this with you, but it was one of my biggest mindset shifts that helped me start to see that what I used to see as that unknown is that place of fear. So I kind of always, I had the known and the unknown, and that unknown was the future. And I used to live in a place of fear and anxiety around the future. And to me, it was like that big black hole of abyss of that unknown.
Yeah.
But I got to that point in saying, okay, well, I have the known, and in the known, I'm not happy or I'm not fulfilled. And I've done all this work in the marriage to try to make the steps. We were in counseling, all these things. And then I had the unknown. And actually what I realized was the unknown had two possibilities, whereas the known only had the one. So I tried making all those changes. So the unknown held, well, in the future, I could be equally as unhappy or unfulfilled as I am now. Or the future is the only place that held the possibility for me to be truly happy. And once I realized that possibility was only held in the future, I decided to see that with such light and almost excitement. Like, it was such an amazing thing to be able to view it as that's where the possibility for my thriving exists. Because I've tried to thrive in the present and it's not working.
No. And, I think that shines the light on something else, which is that, our minds are so powerful, right? And we like to play it safe more than we like to take a risk. And what I've learned, and I'm sure you at the same time recreating yourself, is when there's fear associated with an action or taking a big step, usually there's growth from it. And that's what coaching was for me, for example, in addition to, for the first time in my adult life, being by myself. And it has been the most amazing experience. It has been the scariest experience of my life, but one that I have grown from, and I wouldn't trade anything for it in the world.
The growth is unparalleled.
Yeah.
You'll probably appreciate this. I joke with a lot of my clients that I think everyone around the age 40, give or take, I think everyone should go through a divorce, at least spiritually.
Yes.
At least as an exercise to have greater self-knowledge, self-awareness, to say, who am I now at this point in time? What's important to me? Where do I want my life to go? Rather than just living on this autopilot trajectory that was started when you were back in your 20s, when you didn't know who you were and what you needed. So growth only comes from pain. We know this. But the greatest amount of growth can come from divorce, and women especially, because there's a lot of fear involved of, am I going to be alone forever? Or if we were not, didn't have a career, or, the husband was the primary worker in the family who earned an income. There's a lot of fear that keeps us stuck in that safety and security. And it's embracing that fear to say, this is an opportunity for me to learn more about myself, what my needs are, my capabilities, the strengths I never knew I had to draw upon.
Yes, 100%. And it's not just about, sort of feeling like you need to reinvent yourself. Like what I called, what we were talking about earlier about being selfish, to me, it's about reinvesting in yourself, right?
Yeah.
And
so my word on that would be to be intentional.
Exactly. Intentionally reinvest in yourself. And, I agree with you from a spiritual perspective. It is so important. A lot of the things that I have come to embrace, and part of that actually, I have you to thank for from, our retreat in Miraval last year, was really sort of the power of the mind, right? The power of your mindset and changing and shifting. And what I try to work with my clients on as well is really, things just happen, right? And you have the power to make different choices along the way, divorced or not divorced, right? And there's so much power in shifting your mindset and making different choices and realizing that you can, right? Because I think we all get sort of in this rut and we get, it's habitual, right? Sure. But when you're intentional about your choices, to me, that means that you've thought about them, you've thought them through. It's not something that you have necessarily just, gut reacted.
And you took the words out of my mouth. As long as you're being intentional, you're not being reactive.
Exactly.
And you're slowing down and you're taking stock. And part of it, I think that what we haven't tapped into yet is intentionality gets to be based on what is our highest value system.
Yes. Values are everything. That's something that I also did a ton of work on for myself. And I'll even tell you, my values today were not my values a year ago. And it's work that I consistently do and update with my clients because as we grow, as we continue to change, as we make different choices, I now know what my top 5 values are. And when I am living in alignment with my values, I am living my best life.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Absolutely, 100%.
Yes, and value work is so important, and it is something that I didn't even know existed until I embarked in this new phase of my life, and it's completely changed me.
And part of that is getting out of the stories and the shoulds and the expectations of how we thought our life was going to turn out so we can actually tune into part of what you were saying is accept what's happened, right? Yeah. So that radical acceptance to even say in the beginning, I don't like this and I can still accept this.
Exactly.
So we're in radical acceptance, we're somewhat in denial and then resistance, which is going to prevent us from finding that silver lining and finding the growth and finding where is my thrive point.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And and the acceptance piece comes into play also not just of sort of where you are, but who you were that has gotten you into that point. And I think that was one of my hardest thresholds to get through was really sort of that acceptance phase. And the reason being just that I was in such denial for so long that I didn't want to accept what my new reality was. And I think that working with somebody to help you get to that place where you can accept. And part of that too comes into self-love, right? Accepting, so acceptance and self-love go hand in hand. And I don't think I ever truly loved myself. And that was because I didn't even know who I was.
Right. We put our definition of self in the relationship or in how the other person treats us or what they say. We go along with that.
Exactly. You're just, again, it's like the mirror, right? Like I was being reflected back what he saw. And if I, whatever he saw, I just accepted, right?
Right.
And all of a sudden he wasn't there anymore. So how do I accept who I am if there's nothing being reflected back? So I really had to actually look in the mirror and look at myself for once and say, like, who are you? Do you even know who you are to even love what you see? And, in order for me to get to that place of acceptance, I had to learn who I was and I had to learn to love myself, love everything about myself.
Yeah.
Whether that be physical, attributes or whether that be just, physical, emotional, mental, whatever it was. And,
it's such a powerful practice. I'm so glad that you're bringing the awareness to how to do that. And I think that in and of itself could be months worth of work, right? It's not just a one and done.
No.
So tell me, and, in the next few moments, if someone's just beginning to go through the very first stage of divorce, what would you say is like one tip of some tool, or I don't want to sound cheesy of here's your best piece of advice, but what is that starting point for someone who is maybe feeling like in that downward spiral of, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to hold on to. It's my new normal. What would you say would be a place to begin?
One tip, if I can sneak in two, I think that two sort of go hand in hand in and amongst themselves. I think that the best piece of advice that I can give to somebody, or even just to give advice to myself, if I had me 2.5 years ago, is it's okay to not be okay. And
say that again. It's okay not to be okay. Absolutely.
Yes. And to feel the emotions as they come up, because what I found is that when you push them aside, what ends up happening, it's that compound effect, it's that snowball, right? That it just gets bigger and bigger, it festers, and then a big explosion happens. And typically that happens either with your ex and you regret it, or it's with your kids or a loved one who you don't intentionally want to explode upon. So the thing that was really valuable to me was just to sit in whatever emotion came up. And, yes, the stages of grief, it's the same. Grieving your marriage is the same thing as grieving a loved one who's passed. You go through those stages, you go up, down, up, down, up, down. Like you take 2 steps forward, you take another step back, and just embrace whatever you're feeling. You have to, what I say, and
not to judge it, right? And
exactly, do not judge it.
I love that you shared that, because that's actually what I did through those early stages of my divorce. And there's actually studies that show that naming what's arising, naming your emotions, actually calms the emotional alarm in our brain. So it actually prevents that compound effect from happening. Mm-hmm. And so I literally used to say out loud, this is what sadness feels like.
Yes.
This is what anxiety feels like. This is what fear feels like. And by naming it, what it also did would allow me just to sit in it. But by naming it also allows that observation of the emotion, so I can see it for what it is. It's just sadness. It's not the end of my life. It's not, I'm not doomed to it forever. It's just what's happening right now. So I love that you said that, because I did that as my first step. Yay!
Yay!
So Wendy, I think you and I could talk for hours about divorce. And I think I'll have to have you on again, because there's so many more tips and tools that I know our listeners would really benefit from. And again, even if it's not strictly through divorce, it's about discovering who you are at this point in your life. And so many of these tools can allow no matter what we have going on, right?
Absolutely. It helps whether you're going through a divorce or you're still married. There's so much, it's really about yourself at the end of the day, and really making that investment. And it doesn't matter what stage of life you're in either.
So how can people find you if they want to connect with you and say, oh my gosh, I need a divorce coach to help me through this?
Well, I would love to connect with as many of your listeners as they want. So they can connect with me. I am on Instagram, which my handle is U2.0. So that's YOUTWOPOINTO. I'm also on Facebook. You can connect with me on my personal page, Wendy Sterling, or on my private Facebook group for women going through divorce and are looking for a supportive community. And that is called Finding You 2.0 After Divorce.
And all these links will be in the show notes. So anyone who wants to get more information from Wendy, or maybe do some coaching with her, can find those links on the show notes. Wendy, thank you so much for your time today. And I know that, like I said, I think we could talk for hours about this. So we'll have to do another time when you're on, giving some more tips and tools to help people through these transitions, because they have the possibility of making life just so different when you're guided in that compassionate container. And even just to let you know you're not alone. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, that's the biggest piece, is just to not do it alone. As women, I think that we, like to be strong. We like to be perceived that way. And to me, strength in saying I need help is more powerful than trying to do it by yourself.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I look forward to next time we get to talk.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me, Jory.
All right. Take care. Bye.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.